We are on episode 8 of the Telecaster student build, and we're in a transition phase right now, which is pretty cool. We've got necks that are done, students have necks that are done. There's some students that are kind of falling behind. For those of you who are just catching this series, what this series is about is this a video project for a class that I have where we're teaching electric guitar, basic electric guitar building at a local college and their luthier program. And I'm building a Telecaster on video, and then I'm building a Stratocaster live in the class, and the students are picking and choosing one of those two to build as their school project as they learn how to build electric guitars. I've been working on multiple projects simultaneously so that I have items to show in this video and items to show at the class. So I've got two Stratocaster necks right here. One of them is a one-piece maple. And then I've got two Telecaster necks right here. And I'm going to continue the process. We're moving into talking about the body. Now that these are pretty much done and they're fully shaped and we've got transition areas and I've sanded up to 120 grit. I still see on a couple of the necks I have some previous rasp marks to remove. So we're going to have to go back and kind of tweak them ever so slightly. But for the most part, the heel dimension is done, and that is the critical thing, and that's why we're working on the necks first. We want the heel to be ready to test fit a route in the body blank, and that is going to be the critical next step for us. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit. The first one here is a two-piece alder blank that I purchased as a two-piece blank. All right, so that one is ready pretty much to go. We might have to do some thicknessing to it before we get going, but that one is ready to go for sure. The other super common wood for Fender type guitars is the swamp ash, and this happens to be a three-piece that came with a kit that I purchased from Stu Mack, a kit that was developed by the folks at Stu Mack's to provide pretty much a turnkey solution of all parts needed for the students of my class. And in the near future, this same kit will be offered to the general public, but right now we have to call and kind of get special part numbers for that to happen. But anyway, the swamp ash here is a three-piece, a very common wood, and that is going to be paired up with this neck right here, and it's going to have a really cool die finish to it. But that's going to be the Strat that I'm working at in class at the school. This isn't a traditional Fender type wood. This is whitewood, an African species. But I want to give it a try since I'm making several guitars here and several similar guitars. I'm going to try it and compare it against maybe an alder body. And this is going to be a Telecaster. So we're going to have one neck going on this guy here, and then we're going to have the other neck going on the alder body, and with the shape being the same and the neck woods being identical the same, it'll be an interesting experiment. The last one here is going to be a three-piece, but what I want to show for my students and for this video is that you don't always have to go to the online guitar supply place in order to buy your wood blanks. This was purchased as a piece of premium grade alder from a local hardwood place here in the Colorado area, Austin Hardwoods for those of you who are in this area. And this was machined and milled down to a little bit, about 1 7/8 actually, and I separated it into 3 different pieces, and now we're going to glue that up because I just want to demonstrate that the gluing process is perfectly fine to do it that way if maybe you don't have access or maybe you don't have the funds to buy the premium wood that's already been either one piece or been glued together and it's a little bit on the pricier side. This alder is a very affordable hardwood from a local hardwood dealer, and you can really get an excellent guitar out of that too. So that's one of the things we're going to show here today. The other thing I want to talk about is what I'm providing for the students every step of the way with the Telecaster Stratocaster build is templates. And so I'm making the templates for the school, for the class to use at the school. And we now have 2 complete sets of body templates that are going to be utilized. So this would be the Telecaster one, and it's in a standard configuration, but I also made some optional center strips with different pickup configurations for those who want to experiment a little bit with different than standard pickups. And then lastly, I make a separate template that I use specifically for routing the neck pockets. And that's what this one is for. So this has got the fit that is required for the necks, and if you can, I don't know if you can see that, but that's just barely fit in there and very little wiggle room, so that is a very good fit. We also have a full line of Stratocaster templates. Now there's more variants, I would guess I would say, for the Stratocaster. So I have a few more options available. We got the same neck pocket template, and this one just happens to have part of the electronics cavity on there too, because I kind of like to combine some of these templates whenever I can, but separating from other functions when they have to be done separately. For instance, this is separate. This electronic cavities template is separate from the pickup cavity template because there's different depths, and I don't want the challenge of going from one pocket area to another pocket and maybe messing up and making one portion of the pocket too deep. So I just separate those two templates so I know I can go to about 3/4 of an inch on this one, then I can come back here and go about 1.25 to 1 3/8 on this template, and my boundaries are going to be set, so it's going to be pretty straightforward and easy. For those who want to use an optional pickup configuration on the Stratocaster, this template is kind of the modern day standard, so it can accept, you know, the humbucker, single humbucker, or humbucker single or any of those configurations like that. And here's a back template. Here's a template that's got the back trim route on it, but also I incorporated where the belly cut is going to be so they can trace that line and begin carving that by hand. And then I've got some pickguard templates for your traditional single coil set, and then one for humbucker single, and I could make other ones if needed, if a student was looking for a different configuration. So I'm a little torn on this episode because this would be probably my shortest episode of the series if all we do is talk about what I'm going to have the students do next class. Because some of them are still behind, so I want to go forward, but I want to ease it forward and not get too aggressive where they fall so far behind that they get discouraged. So we wanted to give them time to catch up but continue going forward. So the first thing in this episode I'm for sure going to cover, and that is if you're using a multi-piece body blank that you have to glue up, I want to go ahead and show some techniques in gluing that up. All right, let's get to the glue up. We've got 3 pieces of alder that have already been planed and thicknessed. My final dimension that I want for this neck blank is 1 3/4. I'm okay with 1 7/8 at this point. We'll get this glued up, we'll plane or sand it, thickness sand it down to the exact dimension I want, and we'll get out any final deviations, you know, ridges and stuff like that, and that gives us a little bit to play with. I take 2 pieces, and then I'll begin rolling that out. I'll get just a little bit of light pressure, and then I'll add these other clamps just to make sure everything stays in place, doesn't shift and slide left and right, and also doesn't bow up on one side or the other. Now we'll take the last clamp and apply a little bit more pressure along the top, and that'll kind of equalize the pressure along the whole length. Another great thing about these Bessie clamps, easy to stand up and set aside while it dries. All right, so it's been a little over an hour, and now we're ready to take all of our Bessie clamps off of here. All right, once you got your body blank glued up, you can see I wiped that one down before, but this one, so I should be able to scrape this off without too much effort. Now you can use a traditional card scraper, you could use one of these StewMac ultimate scrapers. That does a pretty good job, but honestly, the old utility razor blade is kind of my favorite go-to scraper, because man, this thing will really bite in and take all that stuff out, and when it's all gummed up and messy, you just throw it away. So All right, so now that we've have the 3-piece alder glued up and we've got it scraped down, we're ready to run it through the sander. But honestly, I'm going to give it overnight just to make sure that glue is absolutely hard. We're going to kind of leave it here and set that aside. But we can kind of get ahead of the ball game today and maybe work on something that we're going to need after we accomplish that thickness sanding. And that is to do some test cuts on the pocket itself. So what I'm going to do is create a center line, and this is just a test piece of wood. All right, then we'll break out the straight edge, connect the dot, and that will be our center line right there. And now I'm going to fasten this down to the table, and I'm going to hook my clamp up, and then we'll be ready to do a test cut. But our pocket is very flat, and we can take our neck and press that in, and it's pretty snug actually. Okay, so I mean there's no wiggle side to side, so I'm actually very pleased. Now I expected this because the template that I was using were designed to match each other, both the neck pocket and the neck template, so it should, but that is a good fit. So since I'm waiting till tomorrow morning to do the thicknessing of the actual body blank, there's nothing else I can do tonight. So we'll be back in just a couple seconds your time, probably 10 hours my time, and we'll be ready to do it again. All right, I let this glue dry overnight. Now we're going to go and take this to the thickness sander and take it down to 1.75 inches, right on the money. There she is, 1.75. There's a lot of ways to go about this. We're going to take care of the neck pocket first, but in order to do that, I've got to find the center line. And it just so happens that I know it's 13 inches, but I got the center finding ruler and makes it just a little bit easier. Once I mark my center line, I'm going to take and figure out where my template is going to lie. All right, there she is. Now some people like to cut out the body shape first. I've done that before, but I'm thinking for this class of first-time builders, the best thing is to get the pocket right, because we can actually take the hardware and make measurements and ensure that the pocket is at the correct depth and the correct location and everything is good. The benefit to doing the pocket now, if something goes wrong with the pocket, whatever, template slips, you went too deep, whatever, we have so much extra wood here, we could just lop off that end, that first three inches or so, and then we could move this down to this location and redraw the template and reset things up, and we got a second shot at it. Now hopefully we won't need it because we did a test pocket with that piece of wood that I showed you previously. So now this template should lay directly over top of the other template, and the center lines should match up. And if we get it in just the right position, then it is good news. Good news for us here. Now before I actually tape that template in place, I want to talk about the neck pocket that we previously tested. We have a really good fit there. But I can actually get about 1/8 of an inch gap right there. Now this is tapered, so once it's really snug, it creates that gap on the back, but that means that I have a little bit of extra play on the sides. Now I'm not worried so much about it because finish is going to take up some of that, but I would rather be a little bit tight at this stage. So what I'm going to do on this template, I took a layer of the brown binding tape. I like this more than other types of tape because it's not stretchy. It's pretty solid. It doesn't compress much. And I made a layer inside of my pocket. So folded in half, that will take up approximately 12 thousandths of an inch. 12 thousandths is 2 layers, basically right and left of that. All right, because it really is good practice to use a Forstner bit to hog out a lot of this material, take it easy on your router bits, we're going to go ahead and do that. I've basically zeroed it out here and on the wood, and I've got it set to a 1/2 an inch. Now we want 5/8 of an inch total depth, so I'm going to go to 1/2, and that leaves me an 1/8 of an inch to clean up everything. It's a real good starting point right here. All right, so finishing up that routing of the neck pocket, we got a really nice position here. We have 5/8 inch deep pocket. We've got a super snug fit. Now I had a little bit of gap at the front edge. I'm going to show you a close-up of what that looked like. As you can see, it's just about a 1/16 of an inch gap. And that is because the radius of the neck is a little bit tighter than the radius of the neck pocket. All right, so I've already done this, but instead of trying to get a tighter radius bit, all you have to do is take a handy tool like this, a little 1-inch thick piece of MDF with no sandpaper on the edges, and I've got 80 on one side, I've got 120 on the other side, and basically I can work it and then round those corners a little bit at a time, back and forth, do some 80, do some 120, okay, round those corners, and just test the fit until you have a fit that is dead perfect, like this one here. I'll show you a little close-up of what it looks like now. You can see how the gap is completely closed and that neck is butt flush up against it, and that is the type of fit that we want at this stage. Now ultimately it doesn't have to be as tight as what this is, but I can very easily get the pocket ever so slightly larger after the finishing is all done in order to compensate for whatever finish I've applied to the neck. So I'm not worried about it. I have a good fit and I'm happy with a good fit, and I can adjust it later should I decide I need to. The other thing I'd like to check is to see if my neck pocket is deep enough. How I can do that is by dry fitting the components right now. Here's the bridge that I'm going to be using this guitar. And by the way, everybody seemed to really enjoy last episode where Matt of Texas Toast Guitars came over. And sorry to say he's not here this week, so you just have to deal with me. But he did leave with me one of his Texas Toast Tele bridges, which is really cool. Very hefty, brass, nice chrome plating. Well, I'm going to use this bridge that Matt gave me on this particular guitar. So what I want to do is figure out what the adjustability range of these saddles are, and it appears to be somewhere between 14 to 19 millimeters above the surface of the guitar. So what I want to do is see if that's going to be good enough. So I'm going to take this out of the way, and I'm going to lay a straight edge from the first fret where I have a spacer of about 10 thousandths of an inch, and then at the 12th fret where I have a spacer equal to the typical string height that I use, which is 5/64 plus or minus 4.5 to 5.5/64, so somewhere around 5/64. And I'm going to take this now and measure to see how many millimeters I have, and if I look on here, I've got 16 millimeters of clearance. That is right in the middle of the adjustability range of this Texas Toast bridge, okay, right in the middle of that range, taking into account my string action. All right, so we are at absolutely the perfect position for continuing forward. Another question you're probably asking yourself, Steve, my neck is a lot skinnier or a lot fatter than the template was made to be. Because you either messed up and had a design modification, or that's just the way that you wanted it. In that case, you need something like this. This is an adjustable neck pocket template. You basically loosen those screws that go through threaded inserts, threaded T-nuts on the back, and you adjust it for your neck. In this particular case, I've adjusted it so that it is very snug to this template around the 3rd fret. Now I can take a middle board with a center line, matching center line to center line. I can lay this on top and butt the neck directly to that stop. That's that board stop there. And then I can shim out the 2 sides back here, left and right, to make sure I have equal space between each side. And when I do, I get clamps and I clamp this device down to my body blank. Then I can remove the neck, and this now is a template for the route that I need, and it will be exactly like the heel. So this is a very simple jig that you can make. It just needs adjustability on both ends, and then you need a center line that will come up. Now the other side of this center line needs to be kind of a Strat style with a little curvature there. So that's something that certainly would be handy to have. All right, so that's how you do it. Okay, last couple things about neck pockets, just for information purposes. If you are going to use a tune-o-matic style bridge, typically that will require some type of angle to that neck pocket. Depending upon the guitar that you're building, that angle could be 1 degree, it could be 3 degrees. All right, so you have to calculate this very carefully. So anyway, there's formulas for figuring out how much angle that you need in order to equal a certain amount of height. And I think it's a little bit too in-depth to go into here in this video. But if there's any questions, we can certainly cover that in a subsequent video. And anybody in my class that's trying to figure out that angle, we can go over the math in class as far as how to calculate how much angle is going to be required if you're using a tune-o-matic style bridge on a Telecaster. So let's wrap up this short but sweet part of the Tele build. If you're going to be doing a drop top on your Tele or Strat for that matter, then one thing that I have not mentioned yet, before you do that neck pocket, you're going to actually route out your wire channels that are going to be going underneath of the drop top, and then you're going to do any forearm contour beveling, which we're going to show at a later time, and then you're going to glue on your top before you actually make the pocket itself. So there's a little bit of variance going on if that's what you're doing, and we may have to adjust fire, so it all depends on what you're doing. This one is going to be one solid piece of alder, so I was able to work with the pocket directly at this time. But what we covered today is we covered gluing up our lumber that we get from our local hardwood store. We talked about thicknessing in that to the final dimension. And we traced the template on here so that we had a place to work for routing out our neck pocket. And we showed techniques of using templates, just using a parallel type guide technique. And we also talked about what you're going to have to do if you are using like a tune-o-matic style bridge that requires the neck pocket to be slightly angled. So these are the critical things that we went over today. So remember, until next time, no matter what you do, start with excellence.